Hello, Red.
Hello.
So, tell us more about yourself. Did you grow up in the US? And since we're talking about topic of socialism, how did you come to ideas of socialism? Are you in any party?
Yeah, sure. So I'd be happy to talk a little bit about that. So I'm born and raised here in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, and I've really been here all my life. I've gotten the chance to travel a little bit outside the country, and that had something to do with my how I became a socialist. For example, when I was traveling I've been to Southeast Asia, I've been to China, I've been to various places around the world, and through my experiences, also which were done through my studies at school, I came to learn a lot about it and see the sort of the struggles of different people all around, not just my own region, kind of contextualizing that, but also, of course, how people deal with things in other places in the world. So that's a huge part of how I became to understand politics more. In particular, one of the things that I learned about was basically through the struggles of, like, for example, labor unions in the United States. So with that, combined with my educational background, my work experience, and my union and all that, that's how I've come to my politics.
What did you read? What was the most influential on you?
The first book I ever read on the topic of socialism and communism was the Communist Manifesto. It's so basic, right? But that's where I started, at the very start. Okay. And as soon as I read that, I'm like, this makes a lot of sense. I'm shocked by this.
It's like old book written in 19th century language that's very hard to understand. It says a lot of ununderstandable words there, like proletarians. And how did you get through it?
I got through it, I guess, because the way that it's written, at least for me, was very evocative. And I guess what I mean by that is, it evoked strong emotions in me. I read that, and it was a call to action. You can feel the passion that Karl Marx uses when he writes. He really cares, and he wants you to feel what he feels too. And so reading that, I might not have understood exactly what proletariat is, but of course you can just look that up now. We have the internet. You can find out these things. It's like, okay, what is proletariat? How is that different from working class? How is that different to, what means of production a worker has available? Things like that. You can learn all these things. So I had the benefit of doing that.
Okay, interesting. What's next then? Communist Manifesto. How did you grow to just Communist Manifesto was enough, or did you read Capital, or Mao, Stalin, Marx, Lenin, of course?
Yes. So my next stop, aside from reading various Marxist stuff, yes, I ended up reading Lenin. And a lot of State and Revolution was actually the first work from Lenin that I read. It's very relevant even now. I strongly recommend that people read this, of course. Because of how important it is, especially in the moment that, of course, we're going to be talking about related to the Chaz, right?
Sure.
It's all very relevant information. And then going from there, of course, then I read more about China, and Mao and the history of Chinese socialism there. So I both read the text of theory, but also contextualized theory, right? History books that detail and document different things that happened, and from authors that were not, did not have a specific agenda to demonize socialism and communism, which is very common in this country. You do not get a fair representation of any of this. People in the United States, I think, have a hard time understanding why hundreds of millions of people all around the world defend and support socialism and communism. They don't understand why, because they've only ever been given one view. But if you talk to people, especially the countries where these things were done, I don't need to tell you about that, it's much more common elsewhere in the world. It's much more normal elsewhere in the world. And we in the United States have been living in a bubble.
Yeah, still it's very surprising for me and for all Russian YouTubers that were watching my previous video. They're like, why there are communists in America? That was surprising for them. Still there are more and more of them, We had a lady there, from DSA, and she said that there are 50,000 people in her party,
That's correct.
65,000, I don't remember.
Yes.
The numbers are huge, I don't know, I didn't expect that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
keep in mind.
I think it's not only you, it's all youth are going towards the socialism, and this New York Times preview, in 2015, I think, they were asking people around, and I think 51% are thinking that socialism is not bad. They're not talking about communism, of course, but at least the word socialism is not becoming prohibited,
And this is huge, because for a long time, even talking about socialism, you couldn't get anywhere talking about it. It wasn't, you just couldn't. That changed really, in my opinion, was 2011 with Occupy Wall Street. You finally had a class-focused narrative of the 99% and the 1%, right?
Yep.
A economic demand, economic protest. You don't see that very often in this country. Like even now with a lot of the different protests going on, they're typically social related, social issues regarding Black Lives Matter, right? On the fight for LGBT. But with specific economic demands that talk about the conditions of working class people in this country, that's a little bit rarer. And it's not because the conditions are good. The conditions are actually horrific. They're actually really bad for a lot of people. The United States is in large part a developing country. It's a third world country for a lot of people that actually live here. And that's something people don't know. You see the big cities and you say, oh, they must be so wealthy. It is a wealthy country, but not many people have the wealth. That's the thing. And you will see very poor conditions. I saw a lot of people in Southeast Asia who lived better than a lot of people I know here. That's just the reality. Now, with 2011 and Occupy Wall Street and these economic demands, that sort of brought things to the forefront. It was now relevant to talk about class and to talk about economics as specific demands. Class consciousness began to come back into the United States. It had been there historically. Yes. It was lost for a while, especially with the loss of the USSR. People said, okay, socialism is done, it doesn't work. The future is neoliberal global capitalism. That is proving more and more by the day to be false, qualitatively false in every single way. So then you had Occupy Wall Street, even though it fizzled out, it got crushed by police.
Yes.
That sentiment still lingered. And then again, in 2016, who do you have? Bernie Sanders, which is huge. A presidential candidate who will use the word socialism. I mean, this is unheard of. We haven't had that. It's for so long, or maybe even ever, maybe FDR would be called by today's standards a socialist. Of course he wasn't, but this is a new watershed moment. This is something truly new with Bernie Sanders. And not only did he talk about socialism, people not just didn't care about it, they loved it they loved him for it. You had, millions of people, just like in 2020, for his rally down in Tacoma, he was 20,000 people. They filled up the entire stadium to listen to a man talk about socialism. That's new.
Still he lost somehow.
He did lose, and we can talk even more about, oh yeah, exactly, twice. But the thing was, he was the runner-up both times.
Just quick question, you can't expand to this answer. Do you think he was an intentional traitor?
What do you mean?
He was pretending to be a socialist just to move people, and then he was like giving all his sympathy and votes to Hillary Clinton or to Biden now, Like, he's agitating. He was like, we're against capitalism, we want to change capitalistic system. And then in the end, when he lost, or even before he lost, he's like, vote for Hillary or vote for Biden, and they have nothing to do with socialism. And for me, it sounds like betraying a socialism. If you lose, okay, you can lose, but don't give up your ideals, don't give up your votes,
Absolutely. The way I read it is that I don't really think Bernie Sanders can be viewed purely as like controlled opposition or like a pressure valve. Things are getting too crazy, so you need someone to go there and release the pressure a little bit, give people little demands. I don't think so. And the reason is because Bernie Sanders has had a very consistent record, long-standing record of fighting for a lot of the same things he talks about. He's very consistent. He's been going back, 20, 30, 40 years.
What about this inconsistency that he's saying to vote for Hillary because he's part of the Democratic Party? That's what you think is happening?
Yes, in part. So what I think is really going on here is that when Bernie was unable to win, when he lost, he basically threw in his support behind first Hillary Clinton and then Joe Biden. Why? Because in my opinion, he probably felt that it was more worthwhile to not be perceived as a spoiler, right? For he wants to win Democrats over to his ideas, and he wants to keep himself to not appear as though he's like selling them out. He's like, because for example, if Trump wins, then everyone's gonna be, oh, it's the Bernie people. Of course, they'll always say that. It's not the Bernie people, they voted Trump, which is, I don't really know if there's data to suggest that. Maybe a little bit, but not enough to turn the election. No, Hillary lost not because of Bernie supporters, not Bernie or bust people. She lost because she sucked, to put it lightly. But that's what I think is really going on there. He wanted to throw his support, because he's not enthusiastic. You notice that. He's not like, yeah, Biden, yeah, Hillary.
I think I feel like he's like old Soviet leader, like Brezhnev or Khrushchev, the Chernenko.
Yeah.
So like this, I don't know. Yeah. So coming over to more, what's happening in left movement in Seattle? Is there a huge revolutionary party with class consciousness, or there are like 100 different organizations, because it's hard to understand. You don't see any symbol of socialism except Bernie, and he's our Democratic Party,
Right. So I guess the best way to describe that is that, short answer, there's no large like revolutionary party in this region. Unfortunately, we just don't have it. This is the question that myself and many of our comrades also always ask, where's the party? Where's the party? Well, the truth is that there are a number of different organizations. The largest organization in this region, obviously, is the DSA. The DSA has a lot of members. It has different chapters all in cities all around the area. And the Seattle chapter is very large. I can't give you the exact numbers off the top of my head just because I've never been a member of the DSA. I was too radical, I guess, for DSA always. I started out, before all the stuff, 2016. I was a communist before that.
How about you going in and then changing DSA from inside?
Oh, so this is an interesting idea, is like, do people have the discipline?
That girl from Harris, I think, from the previous video, from my first video, she was saying that, like, my party is very multi-vectoral, somehow, like giving in multi-directional.
Yes.
And we're all very different, but I'm like one of the corner, like I'm thinking this way. Don't ask about my party views, because there is no party views. We're just left.
Yes.
And all of us are different,
Yeah, and I think that's part of the issue with DSA. In fact, someday you should maybe interview you should interview that guy who was former leadership in DSA. I'm sure he'd tell you all about it. But the thing is, like, it is a organization with many, many different views, and it is controlled ultimately by a lot of people who are heavily invested in NGOs, by a lot of people who might have, like, there might be labor aristocracy. In my opinion, DSA feels as though there's a lot less rank and file working class people that like make up like the true working class of our region. So, for example, like where are all the Amazon warehouse workers and stuff like that? What about the longshoremen? What about the construction workers who there's buildings always being built in Seattle? Where are those folks?
Port workers,
Yes, exactly.
There was a protest among port workers.
Yes.
Here in Texas, I think, right?
There was a port shutdown that happened on Juneteenth. And
go there and take a look at it.
Well, it already happened, but like it was the International Longshoremen and Warehouse Workers Union that organized. I can't remember the exact number, but ports all across the West Coast all shut down in solidarity with Black Lives. This is huge, and the ones that happened in Seattle, we had some of our comrades that went to it, and it was very, very powerful working class focus. They're talking about like, this is worker power. Worker power means like supporting people who are being oppressed. It was very radical even. It was far more radical than I think many things that you would see even at Chaz in terms of true working class conscious perspective being put out by a very powerful militant labor union. Because this area of Washington, the Northwest, a lot of it have very strong unions up here. A lot of the rest of the country has weak unions.
Why these unions are communists, are not socialists? Why they're not in one huge party like they were in Seattle Worker Party,
Yeah. And the reason is because throughout the 1970s and 60s, 70s, and 80s, and even in like the 50s too, but like all of these unions, they basically made deals with a lot of businesses, and they expelled their communist members who are really good organizers. In fact, there's many unions that specifically say you are not allowed to be a communist or a member of the Communist Party in them. The IBEW, the Electrical Workers Union.
Right?
No, it's still the same.
Wow.
The IBEW has a specific clause in their union that says you cannot be a communist. It's not allowed. You'll be expelled if you're a communist.
Why don't you just invent a new word like communist or?
Well, that's the thing. It's like communists are still in it. They just are quiet about their views.
Okay.
They might talk about their views, but they might not use the word communist openly.
Okay. So we decided what DSA is. Is DSA a main left party in?
It's the biggest, but in terms of like what they actually do, they are heavily involved in a lot of like electoralism. They're heavily involved in various like NGO for basic social reforms. It's a highly reformist-based party. It's not even a party. It's an organization. It is not a revolutionary party by any means, and it is full of mostly liberals. Not so much anyone radical or anything like that.
Okay, what are other big parties or organizations?
Well, and see, that's the thing, is that like that is probably the largest of that variety. I would say that a couple other large organizations that are probably out there.
I'm going to Socialist Alternative.
Yes, that's the next one.
Yeah.
Yes, that would be the next largest in my opinion. And that one is, at least they profess themselves to be a revolutionary party. It's a Trotskyist organization, so they follow the views of Marx, I guess Lenin to a degree, and of course, and then Trotsky, right? So they are not Marxist-Leninists. Now, their views, I mean, of course, they have Shama Sawant, who's on the city council.
City council, that's that's a big
It is big,
you know?
And I always caution people like, Marxists, Leninists, and Maoists. I always tell them, don't forget that actually is significant. We might not agree with everything, but still, like this, it is significant one way or another. Now, does that mean they have to make sure their message isn't like too radical? Of course, right?
But why she is not successful even on not a small thing, it's a big thing, like tax Amazon. I've been hearing of her talking about taxing Amazon for like 5 years, maybe, I don't know, 3 years.
Yes, a long time, yeah.
She's talking and talking, but nothing is changing. Even this tax is not introduced. I don't understand. They can do like 0.5% tax or 1% tax, and they'll be like celebrating, yay, we succeeded,
Yeah.
But it's still not happening. Why she's failing? Like,
I mean, this is something I can't really say too much because I just don't know much about the campaign, and I'm certainly not qualified to speak on it on any like specific way. I know very little about the Tax Amazon campaign. I live quite far away from Seattle, and I have not been done anything with Socialist Alternative in a long time. For the record, when I was in college, the only organization I really knew to join was Socialist Alternative. DSA was smaller back then. This was 2014 when I was actually was involved a little bit with Socialist Alternative. Not necessarily because I was a Trotskyist, I never was, but simply because it was a socialist party. And I was like, okay, go there, help out. So yeah, but that was a long time ago. That was the Fight for 15. We were talking about the Fight for 15, and that did get passed eventually, and it spread nationwide. That was a campaign that was started by communists and took off across the rest of the country. So it shows that there is some capability for that sort of power to grow. So they are probably the next largest organization in Seattle, I would say.
okay. And then we're coming to PSL, right?
PSL, in terms of their...
Like a circles of people who study Marxism, right?
Yes, exactly, yeah. And like I have sympathies for a lot of things in PSL. I really like the fact that they take strong anti-imperialist stances. But if I could say that one thing that PSL and other organizations sort of like that, other parties or whatever, struggle with, it is making meaningful connections with the working class on a working class basis. Like, for example, like how involved are they in people's like unions? How involved are they? Do they know how to organize workplaces? Do they know how to talk to people about their work conditions? I mean, talking about imperialism and war is very important. I'm not going to discount that at all. But also like the bread and butter of ultimately what we're about as the workers, and being responsive to the conditions of workers, being in the workplace, organizing amongst your coworkers. For example, like I have a union, I can talk to people, and there's many people in my union who like socialism. They're sympathetic to socialism. They really are. They say quietly because there's rules about what we can say about socialism in our union, but there is that current underneath it.
You've come to a very good point that you have to be with people,
You have to be with the workers, yeah.
The thing is, when I've heard about these protests, the first thing I've heard, there are looters, like they're breaking glasses and stealing stuff, and there were like 100 different videos, and they're laughing all Instagram, and at least in Russia, they're laughing like, look, these guys are just stealing, they're
Yes.
just taking stuff, it's not a protest, it's a robbery,
Right.
Yeah, and that was curious for me, and I was actually sharing these views, but then my friends from Socialist Party in Kazakhstan, they were like, why don't you go there and talk to people more,
You should have asked me. I should tell you all about it. I can tell you all about the looting too.
I'm texting you, you're answering like in 3 days.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's so busy. There's so much going on. You know how it is. I apologize.
Yeah. So I went there, and I was talking to people, and I actually totally changed my views. There is this protest is expressing a huge contradiction in society that
Yes.
exists, economical contradiction, and it can't be reformed, in my opinion. It can be only revolutionized. Yeah. This is interesting. But you came to a very good point that people just exist in their own small bubbles, and technology are all about it now. All these video games, VR games, movies. People are so separated and isolated in America,
Yes.
And don't you think technology is killing socialism, killing communism, and it's actually helping capitalism very much? Because I'm sure if we're saying some words, this phone will start recording everything and sending it to people there,
Yeah, Steve is my FBI handler. He's listening in. Hi, Steve.
Yeah, don't you think that technology is like becoming a huge problem for us? Or when I was asking people, and you will watch this video probably sometime, another guy, he was saying like technology is helping us because we can share what's going on. For example, this George Floyd thing, nobody would know about this thing, right? If not, it wouldn't be shot on
Exactly.
cell phone,
Exactly.
Yeah. What do you think about that? is there some technological progress in this, and is technology helping us, or it's actually a big obstacle for us, you think? Because it's very easy to arrest or to isolate or to just put a person in jail for nothing, you know?
Yes. Oh, completely. So I would agree and disagree, and here's why. So I'll start with why I agree with your viewpoint. So technology, the advent of really mass availability of really quite advanced technology. Everyone carries a phone in their pocket. It's like a magic crystal ball. You can do all sorts of stuff with it. But the thing is, obviously, technology has a huge ability to distract. We are constantly being told to try to entertain ourselves, not focus on these different problems, buy this, consume that, be distracted, don't focus on these things. There's a huge amount of that capability in technology. And I feel like that's one of the really negative aspect. And also there's a lot of anti-communist media that always gets pushed out, of course, still by the United States. However, that being said, the availability of a lot of technology has also made it really easy to disseminate socialism and communist ideas. Really, really easy. It's super easy. There's so many different online communities. People are always talking about it. People are like, hey, did you see this YouTube video by this one person? He's talking about the subject about socialism. He's like, yeah, I saw that. I already saw that. You don't even need to go to someone's house to give them a leaflet anymore. They've already seen it. It's already on their phone.
You're still doing it.
He's like, oh yeah, absolutely. You still have to go there and meet people. And this is one of the aspects that I think is just like a practical hurdle. It's that, for example, like for a lot of people who come to socialism and socialist ideas by reading only, they might not have like the best social skills. They're not used to talking, engaging with people, being confident in their views, going back and forth, having a dialogue. They're not confident with that. And so that can be a barrier. Also, the internet can breed a lot of very weird people. A lot of, the internet, there's always a lot of strange people on the internet, but like the same can be said for people on the left and even on the right, right? You get these people that are just like really alienating. They don't know how to like conduct themselves. They're really off-putting, and they don't know how to, for example, I would much rather have a regular person who knows how to talk to people, who's like always like going out talking to their neighbors, they talk to their coworkers, rather than someone who comes to it, all they do is they read on their little screen there, they read about, socialism, and they're like, yes, I have all the good ideas. And then they just start saying all this crazy stuff, and it's like, what are you talking about? So you can alienate people if you just purely come through it through online purposes, I think. But one other thing I need to tell you about technology. Okay. Here's the advantage of it. When we talked about when the big protests were going on, the police, right? They have their big lines. They are, we're facing off against them. Eventually, they start shooting rubber bullets at us. They start tear gassing us, right? All this kind of stuff. We could tell a lot of what was going on because we had people that were listening in on their police scanners, and we were sending that into Telegram channels that everyone was listening to. So like we always knew what was going on, and it's so funny because we would hear about like, one time, because the National Guard was called in, we would hear about how like the National Guard was getting sleepy, they're getting tired, and the cops were like, we need to rotate our people out because we're getting tired, we want to go home. It's very funny, and then we put that out, and it gives everyone a morale boost. They're laughing about it, like, look at these cops, they're not used to being up, but we can keep going, we got all the energy, but these cops are losers, So there's that element, but also we know where they're going to go, right? We're just like, okay, they're heading here, and they also will say stuff like, we've spotted this here, we're on the lookout for this person here. We can get all that information.
Primitive? Maybe they have different ways, different channels, I don't know, maybe they have their own Telegram channel where they can speak. That's so primitive. And
it is, but here's the thing, we're not even using radios anymore, we're using the internet to do it all. Ooh. They are using their radio communication system, but we have it jacked into our internet thing, and then we can have 10,000 people listening to it if we want to, and they all listen at the same time, and we're always giving updates to each other. Very, very effective use of technology.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Now let's go into Seattle protests and what was going on there more. What people were there? Do you think like 80% of them were workers, 80% of them were students, 80% of them were unemployed? I have an interesting thought that without COVID-19, this autonomous zone would never happen. One of my viewers said, talker said that,
I agree with you.
Think about that.
I really do agree with you. So in terms of like the breakdown of the proportion, I don't really know. I can't say with any accuracy because
the impression at least. For example, there was no bourgeoisie there. There was no rich people for sure, right?
There weren't. Well, I mean, I'm sure there were a few people that just checked it out, but no, it brought up, broadly speaking, of course it was mostly working class people, but were they there on the basis of their class? Were they class conscious? Were they there like, I'm a worker in solidarity? I doubt it. Most people were there because it was a social issue, right? For Black Lives Matter, which of course is tied in with class, but that isn't the narrative that is typically put out with Black Lives Matter.
People just don't see it. They'll just see this problem. It's not connected to economy or to anything else.
Right, and that's why the word that's typically used is intersectionality. I prefer solidarity. Solidarity is the older school word, and it means the same thing in my opinion. Solidarity and intersectionality. It means like we're all in this together. You know, how black people are being affected disproportionately by police through institutional racism, things like that. This also ties in with class and class issues. Absolutely, it does. But I would say most people there were probably unemployed. I was not unemployed. I'm an essential worker, so I have to keep working. So I was taking, I was going all the way from my workplace and doing stuff. I was staying there really late at night. It hurt my work.
Still your paid time off?
Yeah, use paid time off, use my leave time, and doing all this stuff. And of course, nobody knows, I keep this very quiet at my job, Sure. But most people there were probably unemployed. Yes, so because of COVID, they had been cooped up for a long time, but also people were on unemployment. People didn't have work. So they're just like, okay, we want to go there. I can stay as long as I want. We can make this into something.
You tell me, who are the organizers? Like, who are they? Did you talk to any of them? Who is leading you? Who is making decisions? And they were like, it's us making decisions, all of us, I'm like, if it's all of us, it's none of you, like, it's not like there is a vote going and then you're deciding where to go or to expand or to shrink, like, that's so silly for people to think that it's just by themselves went there, or did they by themselves went to Capitol Hill and organize this autonomy?
So the truth is, you're actually correct in the sense that there weren't real leaders that called this kind of thing. I'll explain it a little bit. So these protests that were called, right? They might have been called by some like no-name organizations or just some people. There's already a lot of anger and a lot of things happening.
You don't know who are these people. Who was the first that let's go to do autonomy, or let's do another Occupy? Like, who was that? Like,
there wasn't any single person, and the reason why I'll tell you that is because the way of how Chaz formed. So for days on end, we had basically been facing off against the cops. I don't want to say we were necessarily fighting the police. Like there was things like back and forth,
yeah.
But we were protesting. It was mostly the police just kicking the shit out of us, mostly. But we weren't quitting. We keep coming back, making barricades, defending ourselves with shields, And every single day of these protests, they were getting bigger and bigger. Like in the day, everyone would be there, crowd of like 5, 6, maybe even 10,000 people. All these people were there, and very few police. And they just sit there for a long time, and then the crowd slowly dwindles. But eventually, things get rowdy. The police start, they start to like push people. They start pepper spraying people. When that doesn't work, then they start using their tear gas. Which, the tear gassing used by the Seattle police, it's almost unprecedented. The last time they tear gassed like this was in 1999 in the World Trade Organization riots, the WTO riots, the Battle for Seattle. Yeah, so for them to tear gas shows that it was getting really serious. We were shocked when they all did that. It was like, because in Seattle, it is generally known among the organizers that the Seattle police, they will do other things. They might beat people, they might push people to grab people, they use their riot shields, they might use like a little, those little flashbang grenades that explode. They will do all sorts of things, but they generally don't tear gas. That is very rare. Portland does it all the time. Up where we are, no, they generally don't. So for them to do this, it shows a major escalation in force. But every single day, the protests were getting bigger and bigger and more militant and wilder. Every single day, more people show up wearing like a helmet, more people show up wearing like a gas mask. More people show up with things and they're ready to throw down. They're ready to and then the last day of the big protest, people had shields. They had built little shields, and all these people are on the front like this with shields, to defend themselves against rubber bullets, against things.
A true hero, not like Captain America.
Yes, exactly. And like people were, they had things they were using cones, right? Then they put the tear gas out. You put the cone over the tear gas. You pour the water on through the top, and you can put out the tear gas. People were hitting the tear gas back with like a tennis racket. People were being more organized.
Okay, they were fighting, and how did they end up in Capitol Hill? Why it's not downtown? Why it's not northern? Like, I don't understand. It still doesn't make sense to me. Let's go further. Okay, you were defending, you were fighting, and then someone of you said, "Hey, let's just put more barricades and call it autonomous zone."
So I'll explain why was that. So like, the last day of protests were right up next to the precinct. We were right there. The cops didn't have anywhere else to retreat to. And we were there until like, 3, 4 in the morning, all day, 12 hours of this stuff, just like back and forth, and they were shooting tear gas. People would go away and then they come right back. They wouldn't disperse much. People were getting more and more fearless. And finally, the call was eventually made that they said they're going to abandon the East Precinct in Capitol Hill. And that shocked everyone. Everyone was shocked because like, it's not like we beat the crap out of the police or anything like that. No. It's just that they made the decision to leave. Now, there's a lot of conspiracy over why that was the decision, and I can talk about that in a little bit. But the thing is, when the police pulled out, they took all their stuff, they emptied the building, they left, they boarded it up, and they were gone. They put fences up. And so the protesters...
You were like, hey, precinct is empty, let's go there, like this?
Well, it's like the protests were already there. And then they were like...
maybe that's why they left.
Well, it was weird of them to leave because...
It was a fortress for them that they can...
It was, and they had a lot of support. They had the support of the National Guard, they had the support of the SWAT team, they had the support of other police departments from other cities. There's a lot of cops, so many to the point where they really couldn't police any other area. They are all concentrated there. There was so many of them. But
and all highways were locked.
Yes, they were all locked down, and they were just getting exhausted. They were really demoralized. That was one thing we knew because we were listening to their scanners. We knew that they were getting demoralized. But the thing is, when they pulled out, all the protests were still there, and they were shocked. They didn't know what to do. So they're like, well, let's just stay here. Let's just stay here and take it.
It's so
occupy
symbolic. It's so symbolic.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
But it's also emblematic of how Chaz was an accident. Really, it was. An accident in the sense it was unplanned. Nobody planned to have an occupied area there. They just took it because the police left, and they weren't going to go home. And they're like, okay, well, let's take it over, make it ours. Who's going to stop us? We'll just do it. And so they did do it. But because of that, though, there was no plan as to how it should be, how it should function. What systems do you set up to make sure things work? How do you get what you need? None of this was planned out ahead of time. So everything was ad hoc, day by day, just trying to figure it out. And now a lot of anarchists might say like, okay, that sounds nice. Me, Marxist, I like organization and planning a lot more. And I'm not saying anarchists can't be organized, they can. But we ran into this issue of like difficulty in terms of like, who do we have for leadership? What kind of organizations do we have? What kind of decision making do we set up? And nobody wanted to do it. And that's maybe a second thing we can get into, but that's to answer your first question.
How many people were supporting you guys? Do you think if we will poll every Washington state citizen or resident or every citizen of the US and we will ask, is this the right thing to do? Mm-hmm. How many of you will say that, hey, we're supporting these guys, they're great, they're doing the right thing,
It's really difficult to tell because the information that came out about the Chaz was nothing but misinformation, especially at the beginning. So many lies, you would not believe it. And of course, for us being communists, we understand that, bourgeois media will always lie about us, no matter what. It could be heaven on earth, and they'd say, this is terrible. You see this person taking the bus, well, he's actually going to a concentration camp, and he's going to get beat up because he's an enemy of the people. They make up all sorts of ridiculous nonsense about basic things. And that's the thing is, we didn't have information getting out there immediately about what was going on. So everyone was just speculating what's going on in Capitol Hill, what's going on in Seattle, what the heck is this?
I was speculating myself, bro.
Yeah, of course, and the whole world's attention for a short period of time was diverted there.
Exactly,
and then
right.
Donald Trump started talking about it, and everyone's like, what the heck?
And then the mayor of Seattle, we'll come back to mayor.
Oh, sure. But my point, I guess, with all this is that it's so hard to tell what the actual support of it was. So I can't speak about the whole rest of the country, how they felt, because maybe they support it, maybe they just saw misinformation, and they don't support it. But what I can say, though, is that locally, lots of support, tons of support. I'll give you an example. The protests, one of the first times that we got tear gassed, I was out there in it, and at that point, we didn't have our gas masks yet, our respirators. We got those later, but like when we didn't have that, when we got tear gas, everyone runs, of course, and panics. And what happened was, like, we got caught in this big cloud of the tear gas and everything. You can't see, you can't breathe, you're coughing, you're trying to make sure your people are there, you grab hold of your comrades. Yes, and we had somebody, sympathetic people, pull us into their apartment complex and pull us into like their shop where they were supporting the protesters. So they pulled us in there.
To the hall or to the apartment itself?
Well, into the hall, and it was a locked hall though, so they pull us in there, lock it. And they would shelter us from getting arrested for anything happening. They would give us, water, like wash out your eyes. Huh?
How many people they saved? Like 20?
I can speak to 2 separate incidences because my group got split up in all the chaos.
How many people were there when you went to hall? Like, how many people went to hall or like?
So with only my little group in my one little hall, we probably had about a dozen people in there that were all there, and they were sheltering us, helping us. And there was even a lady there with a shotgun who was like protecting the area. She had a double barrel shotgun, and she was like a competitive shooter. You know, it was really cool. Nice talking to her.
Okay.
But hold on. And then the other place was, there was another area that was being sheltered. Another one of our comrades who got split up, they got sheltered in a group, and there was about 60 people all crammed into this basement, all like getting their eyes washed out and, you know, getting their stuff back together, you know, drinking water, and then head back out there and get back out in it. So the people around there, the people that lived there in the Capitol Hill were sympathetic.
Yeah. But you know, you said about all this accident, about all this accidental way of you created the zone, or
Yes.
the zone was created itself, actually, yeah. But then you know, if we gather, all of us will gather in one room, like 20 people in the room, just random 20 people in the room. Sooner or later there will be a leader, or two leaders, or a group of leaders, you know. But there will be some kind of organizations behind it. And this protesting zone, it was there like for couple weeks, you know?
Several weeks.
Sooner or later there will be someone authoritative, you know, like with authority, you know. Hey, this guy, he knows a lot, you know. Hey, this guy, he probably this happened in Capitol Hill. Did some people were like, hey, we should listen more to this guy. Did someone decisions like, hey, we should expand it, or we should shrink it, or we should, someone's decisions were making an influence. So for example, Savant maybe, or Socialist Alternative, or some representatives of Black Lives Matter, did they have any influence on you guys?
Yeah, so this is where things
wrong.
Basically, yes. This was the two core criticisms I have of the entire Chaz, and I can get into a little bit more later with another question.
Sure.
But the two ones are leadership and organization, and it's very basic to say, but I can go into great depth on these two. But when it comes to leadership, because there was no initial leadership, the protest didn't initially need a leader to just happen, right?
Yeah.
Protests happen spontaneously all the time for different reasons. And, you know, even like the really militant ones, because the police were there, the police were like, you know, being brutal to people. They were shooting people in the back as they're trying to run away with the rubber bullets and stuff like that. They were very brutal. They hospitalized a lot of people. A lot of people got really badly hurt. When people are getting hurt like that, you don't need like a leader to rile people up. A leader can be helpful. But in that instance, people are just angry because they're angry. They see all this bad stuff going on. They see their director angry at the police, back and forth like that. But when the police are gone and you have this zone they're trying to hold down, without like a leadership body that's being elected or is accountable to the majority, you just have a bunch of people just doing their own thing. And here's one of why this is, of course, a problem. I don't need to explain to you why there's a problem, but the way it played out in the Chaz was you would have people that would basically, there's like different divisions of people. There was people who were providing like the medical aid, right? There's a lot of people doing medical aid. We even had an ambulance by these people. They just like had it. I don't know how they got it, but they did. Yeah, and there's tents, there's the ambulance. There was, then there was like the security people, you know, and I was a part of the security team, you know, hence the hat. You know, where there's the security people that were trying to help keep people safe. Then there was also like the people who were going around trying to provide food and necessities to people, whether it be like the COVID masks, the masks to wear for COVID, or it would be like just like food and stuff like that, you know, take care of people.
Okay, medical care, security, volunteers for food and clothes.
Exactly, yes, stuff like that. So these sort of groups just sort of existed. As to their internal structure, no idea. The thing is that a large undercurrent of a lot of these groups, these mutual aid organizations, are anarchist leaning. In my opinion, that's where most of them are. These were not like party organizations by socialists or communists. I'm sure that there were of course socialists and communists involved. But if there was a particular left-wing tendency that was most represented, my guess it would be anarchism and various tendencies of anarchism. That's also indicative in the name, autonomous zone, right? Anarchists like autonomy, autonomous this, autonomous that. So there was a lot of anarchists involved here. The anarchists, of course, don't like to take charge. They don't want to be perceived as being authoritarian, or they're directing orders to people. So there is this vacuum that always existed. For example, you had these different groups of people doing their own thing, but there's no coordinating body, even of elected leadership, which anarchists could do. But I always got the impression they just didn't want to. They're like, oh, it's not my job to tell you what to do. It's not my job to have I'm not the authority here. Now this is
saying this anarchists didn't even have their own leaders.
Yes, but here's the thing. Structurelessness, the lack of leadership, only means informal leaders will come up. This is what happens.
That's what I was talking about, yeah.
And that's not only what happened inside of the various groups, with security or with food and clothing or whatever, and medical. That it didn't just happen there, which it did. It also happened in Chaz. Self-proclaimed leaders, people who you might not know about. Maybe people who
you didn't become one of them.
Wow.
Other communist, socialist.
So
One of them.
there's a couple aspects to this. One of the broad consensus views was that the Chaz needs to be led fundamentally by black people. And the reason, of course, why, this was Black Lives Matter protest.
You could call our own common friend to be a communist black person.
But here's the problem, right? Is that like black people, like anybody, like, you know, Asian people, you know, like Mexican people, whatever you have, they have a plurality of views. There's no one black voice. Come on, that's such a simplistic liberal view of race.
By majority, you could organize it.
Is there even a mechanism for voting, though? That's the question.
Just give a piece of paper and then they will sign, you know.
Well, and here's the thing is, like, obviously then you need a body of people to go and run, and then they need to say why they should be in leadership positions, what are their credentials, and also that's not even a guarantee that the right people would get in leadership. For example, I always like to tell people, you know, Fred Hampton, revolutionary communist black person from the United States and the Black Panther Party, great, excellent politics. Barack Obama's also black, and he bombed all of North Africa. Come on. You can't just say, we need black leadership. What kind of black leadership? Don't be such a coward. Advocate for revolutionary.
Who was pushing this idea about black leadership?
It was just the general consensus, and that's the way, and here's the thing, that's how the movement is, because the movement is fundamentally leaderless and more or less structureless. Because it's just like, okay, Black Lives Matter, get this to the forefront, but who is a good black leader? Oh, it's someone who's been active in the community. Sure. But it needs to have a revolutionary leadership. Without revolutionary leadership, it won't go anywhere.
I always keep asking people, like, what is the real problem is? And I was actually pushing people towards it. And I was saying, is it the problem that cops kill black people? They're like, yes, but I said there is a deeper reason. Almost like 80% of people are saying the system needs to be changed. And
yes.
Some people even say, like, system should be demolished, you know?
Yes.
We should build a new system. I was surprised with that. I don't know, I feel such pain for all this movement that it's just end up with nothing, you know? Okay, but we should go step by step probably. So why do you think mayor and local government supported protesters? Huh?
So this is
and
yeah.
I will start with conspiracy theories, of course, right?
Sure.
Democratic Party, they're losing the election. Trump will be next president, right? So they need some kind of a rally, some kind of accident, some kind of movement that will inspire people to vote for Democrats, you know, like that's one of the conspiracies. There are so many things, you know, like Soros, for example, he's paying
Yes.
money to protesters to protest, and then one Russian video blogger, he's like, look, there is a website where you can pay for protesters and they can go for you, you know. I don't know about this website, but for me, it seemed so silly after I have been in Capitol Hill, you know.
Yeah, no one's paying those people to be there. You can tell, right? You know,
Yeah.
they're just full of emotion. They want to be there.
Yeah.
Now, of course, George Soros does, of course, pay like NGOs, right? And he has a lot of influence in a lot of NGOs and stuff like that. A lot of Democratic Party stuff, liberals. Yes, that is all true. But he is not like George Soros is not paying for any communists to be out there. I promise you that. It's such a big internal joke.
Paying to anarchists, bro.
It's this big joke among the radicals that like, I have not gotten my Soros paycheck yet. I'm still waiting on that. I need to talk to their HR. You know, I need to, it's a big joke.
But the answer is, what do you think about all these conspiracy theories?
Yes.
And the basic thing, all of people asking me why mayor did support all this movement, why governor supported this movement. And in Russia, when you do protests, just cops came over and they beat shit out of you, and then you go home. They don't do gas. They don't do.
I know. I would much rather have that. I would much rather have what happens in Russia, because like here you get arrested and you get all these million charges and it sucks. If you just like brawling it out with the cops is much better.
There was some kind of movement like this. It's called Occupy Abay. Abay is actually a Kazakh poet, but there is a street called in his name in Moscow, and people were like blocking the street and doing exactly the same thing. Probably they were more organized. I'm sure it's someone's idea, because after Occupy New York, it's not like yours, you know. But then what they did, the cops came over, they beat shit out of them. Everyone went home, and then they blocked the street for a whole month. You know, they were like cops around all perimeter. You know.
Shit.
Yeah, and all my Russian friends are like, this is just some kind of BS, you know, it's not a protest, it's like some kind of play that your government, your Washington state government, or some kind of opposition party is playing with government, you know. So why cops didn't come over and beat you and just block the street and for all the way, you know, like not enough cops, you're saying?
Well, here's the thing: is like, you know,
And then mayor coming over and saying all this nice words there, and then tear gassed, I think, next day or
Yes.
days again. That was
that happened.
silly, you know.
Yes. So I'll explain it all from my viewpoint. So what I really think happened was, clearly the mayor had no control over the protests, but they tried to. From the very beginning, there was a couple liberal black individuals who were like leading the protests. And by leading, I mean they would get the megaphone, they go and talk to people, but nobody actually really knew who they were. They weren't part of any established community organization that people trusted and knew. And as time was going on, people were like, who are these people? One of them was a lady named Boots, but I always just remember that. But like, she was, people saw her talking a lot with the police. She always tried to negotiate with the police. They saw her talking eventually with Jenny Durkin, the mayor, and people were like, who the fuck is this lady? And this guy that was with her, and they're like, we can't find anything about their organization.
Seeing everything, it all comes together now.
Yeah, but here's the thing: is that like, so people are like, these people are like put there by the city to control us, and so like the word eventually got out, and people stopped listening to them, and that's when the protests also started getting more and more rowdy because people don't listen. Because they were trying to, like, you know what they would do? They would lead the march to the police line. They'd be like, you know, almost 10,000 people. They'd lead them all the way to there, and the police can't control obviously that many people, so they would lead them there, and then they'd say, okay, we're going to talk to the police now. Just wait. Black Lives Matter. And then like they would wait there for hours, and then so the crowd gets smaller, people get bored, they leave. Slowly you destroy the energy, you leave, and they said, we're talking with the city, the cops have to let us through. Hours and hours, nothing changes. Hours and hours, and this happened for multiple days. And then at the very end, then the police start, then like when everything goes away and then she leaves, everyone's in a vulnerable area, and then people start getting tear gassed, people start getting all this stuff, and then everyone scatters.
I just see how
they led people into traps.
100 commentaries are written on this YouTube video saying this guy is so naive. There were other provocators that you didn't know about, and they were leading you to this Occupy zone, and then.
But here's the thing. Yeah.
And then they were, and when they finally get their message, or Trump made some kind of promise to some kind of in Duncan to someone there who was controlling all this part, then they were like, okay, we can go home, and now everything is demolished, right?
Well, here's the thing. So I want to go back to the conspiracy a little bit here, because so after all this stuff happened, when the protests start getting much more rowdier, people start getting tear gas, they start getting beat up, they got shot by rubber bullets, and the pepper, you know, like the pepper balls, the little the flashbangs explode, you know, everywhere. And you know, and then the police try to set up barricades. They tried to do that several times. They first put up like the link barricades. People broke through those. Then they set up these heavier barricades that had like a little step on them. These like big metal ones that would fold out and they linked together. And then it didn't take long for people to overrun those too. And then they stole them, and then we used them. We ended up using the barricades for Chaz later on. It's very cool. But the thing is, like, clearly Jenny Durkin lost control of the situation. That's what actually happened. These liberal protesters, these, and here's the thing, they weaponized.
Now you're saying she started everything, and now
she didn't start everything. No, the protest started happening, and she's like, I don't want my city to turn into Minneapolis. They're going to burn down the police precinct. We need to stop it. And do you know how you stop it? Controlled opposition. Get these two liberal black people up there who will get in front of the megaphone, and everyone will just trust them. They think they're on their side. They think they're like radicals. They're not.
Maybe there were 20 of them, and you didn't know about the rest of 18 of them, you know?
That's a possibility too. These were just the most visible ones. So like the thing is, what you want to do is blunt the energy, destroy the energy of this big movement that is watching what's happening in Minneapolis. And it's like, yeah, burn down the police station, you know? So this radical energy, you want to make it very, very relaxed. You want to turn it down, get people bored, make them leave. Keep doing that day after day. Maybe you'll diffuse it. Well, eventually word got out about these people were fakes. And so nobody listened to them anymore, and things kept on going. But here's the thing. So Jenny Durkin lost control of the situation. She did, of course, go on there very famously, and she says, you know, we will no longer be using tear gas. Literally the next day, tear gassed us. I was there for it. You know, we got tear gas, and we're like, what the fuck? So the thing is, like, she lied to the entire city. Her and the police, they lied to everybody. Now, she could say, well, I just told the Seattle police not to do it. It was actually the SWAT team that did it. I don't know if she actually said that. That's a possibility, so it's not a true lie. But come on, we were getting tear gas. We even have like the little tear gas canisters. We took them and saved a couple that had thrown at us. We had the tear gas, we had the rubber bullets, you know, we have all this stuff. And the thing is, because she lost control of the situation, and the situation was getting bigger and bigger, the protests are getting bigger, people are fighting with the cops a lot more, and they are clearly becoming, clearly people are making their way to the precinct. And if that precinct burns down, she's not going to get reelected. She's fucked. And I personally don't, I think there's a good chance she won't be because of all the police brutality. But here's the thing. Who then gets on the Twitter but Donald Trump? Donald Trump gets on there and he says, Seattle's going crazy, you know.
Now another conspiracy theory, they were enemy of the mayor that wanted to be elected, you know. Who is the competitor of the mayor?
Oh, so I don't necessarily know about the competitor of the mayor, because like, here's the thing, Republicans are not going to win with, they're not going to get Seattle.
Washington State, they will never
Exactly. Only in like the more conservative areas, outside the big cities, there's conservatives.
Yeah.
But obviously, you know, does she have competitors? I can talk about that a little bit. And it's not a running mate necessarily. It's actually about the police union. I'll talk about that later. But the main thing that was going on at the time was Trump was tweeting out and he's saying, Seattle's burning down. This is crazy.
Whole
you know,
world was watching.
yeah, whole world is watching. And if you don't fix this, I'm going to fix it.
Watching the tweets, and people keep talking about these tweets like it's the most important thing, you know. And Russians are like, look, it's such a good democracy in United States. For example, in Russia, someone like from Siberia will say to Putin, hey, fuck off, you know, like that. This never would happen, you know. He just could be losing his position like in next day, you know. Like,
wow.
yeah.
So that's the thing about obviously the United States is that we have this freedom of speech, so-called.
Yeah.
And you know all about this, but like the thing about it is that people
really separate, yeah, and kind of independent from each other, yeah.
Yes, exactly. But here's the thing. So Donald Trump was tweeting about all this sort of stuff. But the issue, of course, was that now Mayor Jenny Durkan is between a rock and a hard place. She's between these protesters that she can't control. And then also Donald Trump is saying like, see, you're bad. If you can't fix the situation, I'll do it. Which, by the way, he can't. The National Guard does not answer to Donald Trump. They answer to Jay Inslee, for Washington State. They answer to him. Yeah, Gov.
But
so
he can introduce the army, right?
He could try to use the army. But to deploy that on U.S. soil like that, Jay Inslee would probably deploy the National Guard against the army. It's a possibility they would do that.
It's a civil war. That's good. Did this kind of accident happen ever?
Well, here's the thing: is that to my knowledge, I don't necessarily know about the National Guard versus Army. There generally doesn't happen. But the thing is, Jay Inslee is very anti-Trump. He's very, very anti-Trump.
He's Democrat. All Democrats
of course.
are very anti-Trump.
But here's the thing: is that it goes deeper than just that. You know, the whole Western States Pact thing, and I can talk all about that later. The main thing, though, is that for optics, Jenny Durkan needed to do something. She needed to prove that she had control of the situation, but she also needed to quell the protests. And the one thing that wasn't going to do it was cracking down hard. If she cracked down hard, people are going to start going crazy. I mean, we had people that were walking around, like people were carrying guns and stuff like that, concealed, obviously. But like people were getting more and more militant. People were saying like, we need to start doing more, fighting the cops more, because they weren't letting up and they were being more and more violent. So people were like, we need to fight back.
Yeah.
And then with the National Guard there, people were yelling at the National Guard and saying, hey, you didn't sign up for this. Don't support the police. Your job is to serve the...
that could be exciting if National Guard would join.
Well, I know. And here's the thing is like, I live next to a lot of people in the military, and a lot of them were saying they don't want to be deployed against American civilians. They're like, I joined up because I wanted to go to college. I don't want to beat up protesters. I'm not a fucking cop. They don't want to do that. So like there's a lot of tension within the National Guard, and I guess among the military. They don't like this. They don't like being deployed against American civilians. That's a big no-no. You're heading for dangerous territory if you do that. The police don't give a shit. That's what they do. They love beating people up. But the military, a lot of working class people in the military, a lot of people with different ideologies in the military, they're a lot more conflicted, which is good. Now, the whole thing though, so Jenny Durkan needed to prove herself. So what did she do? She basically said, not only, so the police withdrew. Yeah, and she said, she didn't necessarily say so much that she's with the protesters, but when Chaz was happening, she's like, this is all peaceful. See, I have control of the situation. It's peaceful. There's no violence. Nobody's breaking windows. Nobody's burning anything down. See the police precinct. It's not even burned down. Check and take a look, which is true. All of that was true. She had a reason to portray herself as having the situation under control, to both juxtapose herself against Trump, to say like, see, Trump doesn't know what he's talking about, which is true. Trump was lying. But she's like, yeah, Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. See, situation's under control. I'm the mayor. It's all cool. The protests are nice and peaceful. It's all relaxed. It's all nice. That was the biggest win for her, was to be able to maintain this appearance, just the appearance. Because the people in the chats, they don't fucking like her. They hate Jenny Durkan. There were all sorts of spray painted things that say, get rid of Durkan, dump Durkan. People were saying even things like, get rid of Durkan, So nobody liked Durkan, but Durkan portrayed herself as like, see, it's all peaceful. I have it under control. She took credit for the fact that the zone was peaceful, even though it had nothing to do with her.
Okay, and do you think in somewhere like Port Angeles or Forks, people have your view, or they have a view like hey, this governor does go, or this mayor does control everything, she's good, you know?
I think that for people to believe the mayor, they would first need to understand that it actually is peaceful. So for them to, they would need to like see, you know, whatever media is out there that is positively portraying or neutrally portraying the Chaz.
You've seen it from the inside, and there
Yes.
are these Chaz people, I don't know, let's say 1,000 people, 5,000 people, but they're not voting, they're voting, but they're a very small amount of them. It's just a fraction of the Washington state population. Right?
Yes.
Do you think the people of Washington state share your opinion somewhere, or they share opinion of Durkin's? Yeah.
I think they probably view it as like chaos and lawlessness. I really think that's how they would probably view it, because that's much more sensationalist. It's so much more interesting, right? Cities burning down, it's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, the whole, you know, it's all crazy. You know, I think they would be more inclined to not necessarily believe Donald Trump, but believe the version of events that Donald Trump is laying out, that the city is burning, that it's crazy, all these protesters are taking over, they got guns. It was just 6 blocks. 6 blocks, mostly peaceful, really relaxed.
And in other internet, in Russian internet, they were like, wow, America is breaking up. It's a separate country now, this autonomy. And I'm like, this is 6 blocks. How it can be a separate country?
It's not a separate country. Yes, they put up a little sign that says you are now leaving the US. It's just somebody wrote the sign.
Everyone was taking picture of this and posting it like, that's it, America is done, you know. That's like a break of Soviet Union, you know, the first country who left. Yeah, this is Seattle, yeah.
I will say, though, that in my opinion, the breakup of the United States is very likely, and it could even come within our lifetime. And I'm not just trying to be sensationalist. I mean that, like, there are serious divisions with the United States. This protest, the Chaz, yes, it wasn't a separate country, that's true, but the sentiment, that's a lot of people who pushed and did something that hasn't really been seen in a long time.
I was just born, and 3 years after USSR was broken, now I came over here and USA will be broken too. That's what you're saying, yeah?
Yes, I fundamentally believe that. And you can see where the lines are being drawn, where people are different, they have different ideas. So people are so polarized, there's a lot of hatred against different types of people right now. And that can fit the breakup of the states, for sure.
Yep. So do you think this autonomy have had an influence on all populations of America, or on Washington state people, or on the whole world? Did something change in their minds, you think, or it's just another protest that happened, you know?
I think that the more important thing to look at is, yes, the Chaz is important, I'll talk about that second, but the first thing is Minneapolis, and that's the big one. Because Minneapolis, where that happened, where these big protests happened day after day after day, that culminated in large part to the burning down of the police precinct. That's the police station, not just a precinct, a station. This was a mass uprising. This was a rebellion. You had so many people that took part. It had mass character.
That's exactly the right word. Rebellion, not a riot.
Yes. Yeah, it was not even close to being a riot. The police didn't voluntarily leave. They forced them to go, and then they burned down the whole thing, and they stole all the stuff out of the police. The police didn't even have time to clear out the place. The protesters got to it, burned it out, and they looted the police station.
Okay. And what has changed in the mind of random Texas guy, Hawaiian guy, Alaskan guy, or random Californian who is driving his car and going to job as a farmer or as a software engineer, or nothing has changed, right?
Well, I would say that there's 2 things. Number one, I think a lot of people would come away with a viewpoint that, oh my goodness, maybe the country is coming apart. Sort of like what you're saying, what people in Russia might be saying. But for people that are actually there and who take a really close eye, what it does show is what is possible and what we actually can accomplish. I have not seen riots and protests like this and like a rebellion like that in a big city in a long time. This is new. This is a new elevation of what we've seen before. And I've been to a lot of protests.
Much more radical. 1992 Los Angeles.
Yes, the Rodney King riots, right? Yeah. And so you have like these rebellions, but this one was much more sustained, longer term. And in Minneapolis, you know, for them to actually burn down the police station, that's new. And what happened in Minneapolis, the city council basically said that we failed. We have failed to meaningfully institute the reforms that are necessary. We need to talk about abolishing the police and set a police system instead. Now, what that'll look like remains to be seen. But this is huge, very significant. We've never had the dialogue. Everybody talking about, we need to abolish police. This seems like crazy talk. Are you kidding? Abolish the police? This is actually something that may actually happen now in Minneapolis that everyone's talking about, and they're saying it could actually, the ability for them to do it is like happening.
Okay, now we're coming to the topic of the requirements of this autonomy, of this zone.
Yes.
So why everyone is concentrated on defunding police? And for me, when I heard first time that, I'm like, how are we gonna live without police? There should be someone who is taking care of my robbery. And ironic thing happened. Me and my friend went to Capitol Hill, and we were looking at what's going on in Chaz. Then we came back to my car, and car is not there. It was actually towed away. I was.
You got scared.
I didn't notice a small sign that says there that from 4 to 6 you cannot park there. And I was calling police actually and asking them, and it was so ironic.
He's got a liberal inside his mind.
I was there in Chas, and they were giving me stickers that says defund police. And now I'm calling police, asking them where my car is, because I called towing company, and they were like, we don't know where your car is. Although you towed in the wrong place, or although you left your car in the wrong place, we have no idea where is your car. But call us in half an hour, maybe we'll know. I called them in half an hour, they don't know. I called them in an hour. We walked around all this district like 20 times.
Oh my goodness.
We spent like 3 hours there, and then and the police was asking me, was your car stolen? I'm like, I'm sure either I forgot where I parked, or either it was towed. I'm sure nobody stole my car, because it's a piece of garbage, not a car, and then I was like, called my friend, he came over, and we were driving around the block, and we still couldn't find the car. And then I called police and said, someone probably stole my car. That's obvious now, because towing company doesn't know, you guys don't know anything about it. It's obvious that someone stole my car. And I was standing, we were standing and waiting for cops there, and she said like, we don't know when a police officer will come over to listen to your opinion, because you can wait for 1 hour. I said, can you tell me, do I have to wait less than 3 hours, less than 4 hours? She was like, I can't tell you any number, at all. I was like, okay, I am ready to spend whole night waiting for a cop there. Okay. And I was standing there, and I said to my friend, hey, this towing company, they have a parking spot. I know where they tow away the cars. Why don't you go there and look up for my car, maybe there, because I can't find it in the system. I can't find it by the phone. Maybe it's physically there. But they didn't add it in the system. All the 3 hours passed, and they went there and they found it there on the towing garage. I was so pissed, and I called the police and I said, you guys, you are a piece of shit.
There you go. That's what I want to hear.
I had a defund police sign in my pocket, and a sticker in my pocket. I was putting it on my
hell yeah,
on my shoulder, like saying like on my chest, saying like defund police. These guys, they're not doing their job. It's like they could add my car in the system for 3 hours. But where I am going with all this story. We still need police, right?
So
I was going around, and in my first video, you can see me asking people like, "What are you gonna do without police?" And only person who gave me a good answer is this DSA girl, and she said we're defunding 50% of police, not like totally defunding police. It's not like removing police or abolishing, like you're saying. So what do you think about that? What will you answer to people that we can't live without police officers? Yes, they're beating blacks, they're angry, they're aggressive, but we still need them in some cases, right? How are you going to live without police?
Yeah, so this is a central question, obviously, to the chat, and I'll speak about that being someone who's in security, right? Is that the security people, our whole purpose initially was to watch out for right-wing people that might be suspicious, because we had people like shooting people, we had people driving their cars into the crowds and stuff like that. There was always some chaos that we were supposed to respond to, whether or not we're trained, For example, like my biggest thing, like I have guns and I know how to use them, so if there was like a mass shooter, I could stop them. That's what I could do. But it's like, okay, but then, for example, what if there's people being rowdy, like people want to like do all this kind of, like if there's like some kind of fight, you have to know how to break it up. The thing is, we effectively became, in some ways, like, you do need to know how to do the basic policing things that police do. For example, if there is a fight, if people are being rowdy, or there's people that are bad actors, you need to look out for these types of people. And what do? You need a system. You need to professionalize it. And this is something that people in the security team eventually had to do. So we were not like police, but we were the equivalent of police inside the Chaz, basically. And that's what gets very uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of anarchists, is that the realization that, like, my goodness, we need to have a security force. Call it whatever you want. It still fulfills this type of function. Do you need to remove someone? Like, no one got arrested. We don't have a jail to put them in, obviously. But it's like, you need to know how to, like, isolate bad people, get them out of the zone. If there's people who are being violent, do you have the force to respond to them with potential violence too? These are questions that people didn't really think about until it happened. Now, of course, for me, I'm like, yeah, I do understand these. And of course, me being a communist, I want the people's police. That's what I want. I don't have any illusion. Huh?
Militia.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And then like, but here's the thing: is like for our context,
All this message of this protest, it's negative. Defund police. It's
Yes.
not like replace police. If it would be positive, it would make so much sense. Like.
yes, and this is the thing: is that it's so hard to control the narrative because there is no central mouthpiece that is putting it out.
Maybe just don't know.
Here's the thing: is there are people that claim to be the mouthpieces, but they are unaccountable to the group. They don't have to listen to you, and this is what is the problem when you don't have a system set up in place, right? There's no accountability. So with this whole thing about the police, what I would say, have a community policing initiative. Like what can we have under the limitations of the system in which we live? Community policing. Have people from the neighborhood, train them, have rotations of different types of people, have people from that area who know the neighbors, who know how to de-escalate things.
So you're saying reform police?
I am saying that I actually do a favor the abolition of police. I actually do under the capital system.
Like militia, on different principles, on different ways. Yeah,
yes.
That's different message that they were saying. Like,
I know.
This is like defund police.
And I support defunding the police. I don't think it goes far enough, but I agree with it.
Also, do you understand that when you will defund police, who will make less money? Do you think these big bosses who are the owners of the police, like controllers of the police, like managers in the police, like big chiefs, do you think they will get less salary? No, the less salary will be for officers who is like in the field,
Well, here's the thing: is that like
because there is some kind of corruption, I'm sure, or that this system is created that way that.
And like that's one of those things that we'll just have to address. That like, you're talking about community policing, right? Like if we have a community policing initiative, because here's the thing: Seattle police are some of those overpaid police in the entire country. Like some of the officers, like some of the ranking officers, like a sergeant or whatever, they can get up to $250,000 yearly. I don't know anybody in my life who's ever made that much money. It's insane to me that some guy who just walks around and then every so often gets to whack a protester in the face, that they get to make that much money. It's insane to me. That's why they never have any class basis with workers. But anyway, the whole thing about community policing, yes, there could be that possibility of like being paid a certain amount or whatever. That we'll just have to cross the bridge when we get to it. I don't have the solution off the top of my head because we have not seen a community policing initiative take off, especially here. I would hope that there are better mechanisms to sort of balance it out, but I can't speak to that just yet.
Okay, and here we're coming to a topic of requirements.
Yeah.
There is some kind of a document in the internet that the first couple days when this CHAZ was created, there was a document with 19 points, like give a business to African Americans. There were like ridiculous points, like they were so weird and random. And I've seen like 20 different articles and videos from communists, from liberals, from all kinds of people, just usual people, and they were like, these demands are dumb. They can never be released, This is like changing too much, like the government will never follow these requirements, And this website where this was released, these requirements, it says like if it won't be done, we'll be in CHAZ like until all requirements will be satisfied. And
bold claim.
Coming over, I'm like, I was like trying to find, is it some kind of, is this just a website called Capital Hill Zone, something like this? I don't know.
Yeah, that website. Yeah.
And they just got hooted out. Who was that? Who is this website is registered on? Like, and this demand, who formulated, who said first defund police? Like, for me, I'm sure a bunch of people will say that these demands are coming from some kind of who is controlling everything, like coming from someone who is like want to like be bad for protesters, like.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing with that document and the decision-making process. I have no idea what the decision-making process was involved in that. And I hate to say that, but it's the truth. Because the people who are claiming any kind of legitimacy, the people coming out with the demands, who were they? Probably just done at a General Assembly. They have like, once a day they would have these called General Assembly. Have people go up there and they talk about things, and the voting is probably just really informal. It's just like about, how many people sound like they support it. There's no real structure. And so people put out this demand or whatever. But like a lot of stuff, there's crazy stuff that you couldn't possibly get enacted. And that's because there was no body to basically try to make these demands that can be acted upon. It's a lot of people with a lot of emotions suggesting things, and people all just sort of agree because what else are they going to do? You know what I mean? it's not a forum for debate, really. It's so hard to do that in that type of a setting because there's no real committees formed. There's no real representatives elected from the mass of people, and also, trusted community figures. For example, Shama Sawant did speak at the Chaz a couple times.
Yeah, exactly.
She did, and she actually did bring a class narrative. She brought a class narrative about socialism.
That was very good speeches.
They were excellent speeches, yeah. And the issue with that, though, was like she was just one speaker among many. There was other speakers that completely disagreed with her.
Like speakers like every hour, I think.
Yes, and there's also people who are like, you need to show us. One lady who went up after she was done speaking said something like, well, you can't just say we need to replace capitalism with socialism. What are the facts? You need to show us the facts that social. It's like, oh my goodness, it's crazy. What you want? Just a slightly better capitalism? Seriously, it's ridiculous. And that's the thing, is like there's just this random assortment of people that just go up there and they can talk. So there was no coordination, you know what I mean? And that's why these demands existed like that. And that's also why the so-called Solidarity Committee of the Capitol Hill Occupy protest, that's why they were able to go up at the very end and say like, yeah, by the way, we are not doing this anymore. We're going to basically end the Chaz, or the CHOP they wanted to call it. They just couldn't do it. They weren't accountable to anybody. Nobody voted for these people. Are you kidding me? They just represent really themselves, and they have a platform that is conducive to the mayor. Some of these people got to meet with the mayor. People that had no accountability to anybody. They were just like handpicked. They were just liberals. And nobody did anything about it. Nobody knew what to do about it. And before they could even think, it already happened.
Okay, you explained me very well how the protests were organized, how the zone was organized.
Yeah.
How everything was created.
Or rather, not so organized.
Yeah, disorganized. So the protests, how the zone, how it was dismantled, how it was broken, how did it end?
So the way...
I will say my opinion, when I came over the first time, I was like, I've seen so much enthusiasm in people. People were burning, like, we need changes, we will be here until we will die, If we need to die, we will die here, They were so hardcore, I was like shocked when I seen this opinion. I will ask people, and they're like, I came over to party, or I came over to drink, I was expecting people to say that. There was none of them like this.
There's political answers. People went there because of politics.
We need to change system, or we need to reform, we need changes, and they were like very, I don't know. Yeah, and then I came over in a week, there was a festival there, like Burning Man, people were like having fun, there were like so many foreigners, out of state people, and they were just having free food, having free drink, taking so many pictures and videos for their Instagram, for their Facebook, like it looked like fun for them. And I was afraid that that the mayor is making a tourist attraction from this.
Yes.
They're like having fun. And I was like, wow, this is so smart from capitalists. Make a good from the zone, like.
Yeah.
But then, no, it didn't happen. Then, how did it start? Okay, let's go with how did this dismantle? There was a murder, right? Or.
Yeah. So the thing is with the people in security, and this is where I like to use the term. And I hate to borrow this. I believe this. I first heard this from George W. Bush, but it's a nice little phrase. The use of the phrase "unknown unknowns." Maybe it's Colin Powell that said it, but unknown unknowns, like you don't know what you don't know, and that means there's a lot of elements to things that just they're outside of your understanding until they happen. You're like, oh shoot, I didn't think about that, and I didn't even know to think about that. So when it came to, for example, like the security of people within the zone, there was always we always had issues with, like, for example, Proud Boys, right? Proud Boys is an organization that's basically it's a street gang type of thing. Mostly it's effectively a white nationalist group. I know there are some non-white people within it, but it's like a right-wing, male chauvinist type of thing where they just like to beat up anti-fascists, right? That's their thing. They're street brawlers. In many ways, I like to compare them to the Sturmabteilung, the SA in Nazi Germany. They were just these were just like assholes. They would just go around on the street and beat people that were disagree with their politics. That was sort of what they would do, and they were right wingers. Like the SA.
Okay, where are you going?
So what I'm saying is we always had these threats. We had people like the Proud Boys. Then there was issues oh shoot, the guy from the Washington 3 Percenters, which is the largest militia, right-wing militia in the state, and also nationwide. But there's a Washington chapter. It's very large, and there was oh, we have the 3 Percenters showing up, and they have some heavy hardware. They've got a lot of guns. A lot of people, a lot of guns. And we're okay, so then they're showing up, and then there was other people from other organizations. Then there's what about the Patriot Front? It's a neo-fascist organization in the United States. What about these people? So we were always on the lookout for like the security people. But the thing is, how do you engage with a security threat? What are your rules of engagement? Do you even know? Now, for the people that were doing security, you had a mix of like what I want to call like professionals and semi-professionals, and then you had volunteers. The reason why I make that distinction is because the people who initially jumped right into it were people like myself, and people from specific organizations. The most notable organization that was there was John Brown Gun Club. And John Brown Gun Club is known for, they do open carry protection of protesters during actions. They are a left-wing gun organization in the United States. They were part of the Redneck Revolt Network. And they're an armed left-wing group. They do open carry, and they were helping out with the security this time. A lot of them are, like, for example, there's a number of them are former military. A lot of them are very professional. They're excellent people, and I really sing their praises. The thing, though, and then, like, I'm not a member of John Brown. I want to make that very clear. I'm not a member of John Brown Gun Club. I support them. I like them a lot. I'm just not a member. I'm a member of other organizations, and we were all called in together, just like different people who are leftists and who had access to firearms and knew how to use them, were called in to basically provide like armed security for people so that this thing could continue, because we knew that there was threats. The issue is, how do you know how to engage with a threat? Maybe some of these people with military experience, they know what the rules of engagement are. They know how they should handle themselves. They're professionals. But then you have a lot of people who are just like volunteers. They don't really know like how to engage with things, what they should do. A lot of people showed up to the barricades and like, I want to help. I want to protect people. And it was so nice. And you got to talk to a lot of people. But they're just random people. They didn't have, and it's like, okay, do you have body armor? No. Do you have any training? No. Do you have any firearms that you can concealed carry legally? No. Well, it's kind of hard to know. Yeah, it's like, oh, do you know how to use radios? Are you experienced with radio communications? No. Okay, well, you're really not that useful then. So obviously we try to put them to use, but like this became an issue, right? So like eventually something did happen where there was, I mean, I can't tell you how many incidents we actually had where there's like danger that we diffused. We did train people on how to do de-escalation, very rudimentary training, but we did train people. Like there would be people being like acting crazy, or there'd be people, some guy would have a gun and we have to follow him around, you know? There's this one guy who came up there and he's like, oh, I brought all my guns and stuff because I thought this was going to be like a war zone, you know? And he's like, well, I guess it's not. And he opened his bag and showed me he had an RPK in there. Do you know what RPK is? It's like a Russian machine gun. He had that in there, you know? And I'm like, you brought that? And he's like, yeah, but I see it's not a war zone, so okay. You know, I'm just gonna take it and go home. It's like, oh my gosh. So we were always dealing with these types of people. People carrying weapons, people being potentially violent, then right-wingers that are trying to cause a scene. We had this guy who was yelling the N-word, you know, and then he got punched in the face. Yeah. So like there's like stuff like that. So like, but eventually what happened, when the shooting happened, this was a turning point, because the thing was, what happened was with the shooting, we believe it was...
There was some accident that you prevented, right?
We prevented accidents every day. Every single day. And that's the ones that nobody hears about. Like when someone was acting crazy, someone was being a credible threat, when someone tried to drive their car through a bunch of barricades. And this stuff would a lot of times happen like late at night too. Like after 1 a.m. was when a lot of crazy stuff happened. So we always have people on night watch.
You were stubborn that this is an accident, not some intentional acts from provocators.
The shooting? Yes. So this shooting was, we believe it was personal and potentially gang related. But it was an issue that people who were there and watched it, I was not there for this one, but people who saw it, they said that it was an argument basically that escalated out of control, and somebody got shot for it. There's conflicting narratives, but the people who were there on the ground said that it was not political. It was not like a right winger shot somebody.
And it was in chess.
It was just outside. Okay. Yeah. So there was that incident, right?
Okay, and then everything changed from that. It was like a domino effect, or it is not related to...
It did change, and the reason why it changed was because people came to realize that like there's a real danger here. People can die here, you know? And like things, you could argue that things had stagnated a little bit at that point, but then people started to feel really unsafe and people started getting really scared. There was other internal problems also that were making things difficult. For example, like, you know, John Brown Gun Club was being asked to basically be every single problem. People would come running to them screaming like, we need you to help us. And they're like, we don't have the people and the resources necessary to help all this stuff. We try to bring people in, but then people are being undisciplined, right? There was an incident where some people were on like the barricades, they were volunteers, and they were drunk when they're supposed to be protecting people. these people have no discipline. You need to train these people to become basically night watchmen, border patrol almost, you know? Yeah, or you need to pay them, and none of these people are paid. That's the thing. So it's like, oh my gosh. So then there's all these internal problems, and it was so taxing. Here's the thing that you need to remember. Everyone there was volunteers. No one was paid to be there, all volunteers. And because of that, so much work gets put onto the backs of a few people. Who's going to protect people? Who has the guns? Who's going to protect people if things go crazy? Oh, well, it's the people who are just all volunteers. And then everyone comes to them for every problem. They get tired. They get burned out. People get burned out. There's pure volunteer basis. They're there. Like some people were there for like 2 or 3 days straight. Yeah. They didn't even leave. And they're just like going crazy because like, I just need to take a break. I need a night off. My gosh. I just want to use that example as something that like people got burnt out, and all the organizers were just so exhausted. And it's thankless work, you know, what's really going on. So that's an element. But when that guy got shot, 2 people got shot that night. 1 person died. And it really scared a lot of people. And it showed how serious this stuff is. Like, you know, if you're going to be
outside of Chaz, right?
Just outside. Yeah, just outside. That's at least my understanding of it, is just outside of Chaz. Because again, I wasn't there that night, but I had comrades who were there, and that's the report that they gave me. So.
And then there was
another one.
There was an announcement from some kind of organization again, on Capitol Hill website again. They were like, hey, just go home and vote for Biden, for our mayor, and for our governor. There was a huge exclamation, why? And
it got put on
they're going away. And then mayor was like, I am recommending you go home. You're good, guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I came over next day. There was like, the spirit was different, you know.
Yeah.
They were like suppressed, you know. They were like
demoralized.
Yeah, like 10 times less people, I'm sure, yeah. And almost all organizations, there were like 3 or 4, are gone, you know. They're like removed from there, or they were asked to remove. And I'm so surprised with that. Like, you know, how can you just easily demolish this? And of course, we're going here into the conspiracy theory that if it was demolished so easily, it means that it wasn't real, it was fake.
So there's a couple elements to that. I would say it was as real as it generally could have been, in the sense that the people who were there had real passion. The people that were a part of this, from protesting with the police, to, you know, getting shot by rubber bullets and tear gas, all the way to the very end, the people who were staying up all night to defend the barricades and protect people. Like, we were writing down license plate numbers of suspicious cars that were taking pictures of people and stuff like that. We had undercover cops we knew were undercover. We put their faces and people would know who they are. We had like rules about what to do in a radio report. We were setting this up, like, this was passion. That's passion. People wanted to make this thing. But the thing is, you can damage the movement, destabilize it, if you can get at its head. And the thing is, you have to stop pretending that there's no head. That's the reality. I think a lot of anarchists, in my opinion, because like a lot of people I worked with were anarchists. I will work with anarchists absolutely on this kind of stuff. But the thing is, a lot of them, I feel like they don't want to acknowledge that if you don't have formal leadership, you have informal leadership. It happens. It happens. People start listening to specific people. They start listening to certain bodies of people. And if the wrong people take control of things, which easily can happen, then my goodness, you can have your movement destroyed. And that's really what I think happened, is that these people, like again, that notice that you said, it was like, oh, vote for Biden or whatever, this bullshit. And it was bullshit, you know, of course, but that came from this tiny group of people, the Solidarity Committee, so-called. I didn't elect those people. I don't know everyone who's on there. It's bullshit. But like, people listen to that because there was nothing else really to listen to. There's no authority.
What would happen if you are security and you would say, where are the heads? I am red and I am like ahead of this.
Well, this would be the evil, authoritarian, statist, communists, Stalinists.
Who cares? If it would lead to success, if you would be like 5 or 6 like central committee, I don't know, steering committee there.
In the hypothetical.
Why you didn't do it? I don't understand. If you're so unhappy with lack of leadership, why don't you lead it?
This is a really, really good question. And do you know what my answer to that is? Is that at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is, I feel bad saying this, but I feel like the only way people learn that something doesn't work is to experience it. Hold on. And I'm not saying I threw it or whatever. I was like, I let it fail. No. My point is, they won't listen. They will not. Like, the security, most of the people on the security were anarchists. They won't listen to a central authority. They will not. Yes, they just will not. And they're not going to listen to a statist. They're not going to listen to an authoritarian communist unless I can prove through practice things that do work better. And we were getting the security situation better. That was improving. The anarchists and the communists and people were improving the security situation. We actually were more systems in place, better discipline. We were working on that. But the reality is that for like the security team to take over an anti-police protest, do you know what that looks like? I mean, come on, the optics do matter. People are not going to listen. The only way people will listen to a system that works better is if they see their dreams, the way they try to implement it. They need to see that not work. They need to be convinced.
I really wish there would be an anarchist guy from your security team, and I would ask him, do you think Red is right? Do you think the problem was in the lack of leadership? Do you think anarchists changed their mind after all this happened?
Being a part of the chats where I was with a lot of anarchists in there, and a lot of these anarchists I will also maintain, like a lot of them are John Brown.
Stop being anarchists generally.
Well, sort of, in the sense that like John Brown Gun Club, a lot of those people in there are anarchists, and they're highly professional. I have a lot of respect for these people. I really do, and I'm not bad-mouthing them at all. But they were starting to get to the point, like, we need to have a lot more organization. They really say, like, we need more organization. We need much better structure. They didn't want to say leadership, but my gosh, you can call it whatever you want, but you need it. That's what you need. You need a system of relaying instructions, training people, getting people diligent, everyone accountable to everybody. If you don't want to call that leadership, fine. But you know what the thing was happening? Everyone was going to John Brown Gun Club for because they wanted leadership. Everyone's security is like, oh, John, like my hat. Everyone always thought I was John Brown Gun Club. They're like, oh,
club when everyone wanted to have a head of the country. You know?
Yes,
it's like so weird.
That's the thing, is like everyone wanted John Brown Gun Club to lead. They wanted them to lead because they were the most visible people, knew who they were visible, they were professional. Everyone's like, okay, let's follow these guys, and they didn't want to. We don't know if we can do that. That's not our purview. You know, we don't agree with that sort of. But that's what people were asking of them. So it put them in a very strange position, one that they were not prepared for. And I'm not blaming them at all. I'm just saying, like, this is the overall situation, is that like the informal networks come. If you don't have a formal way of dealing with it, the informal things will happen, and you can't control the informal things at all.
Okay.
Or you know what's another one? What about like the South Precinct area? What about South Beacon Hill area? That's super working class, very low income working class areas. A lot of people of color live there too.
There is another conspiracy theory that you've been led to Capitol Hill because it's the safest and chill party district, you know?
Yeah, and like, yes, the people are sympathetic, you know, because like, you know, Capitol Hill is known for strong LGBT, you know, everything like that. And yes, all those people support, a lot of people are there to support it, but like, it's hard to be working class and live in Capitol Hill. It's very expensive to live there. And so like, we're all like the real.
Still, you got support from people.
Yeah, we still got. Yeah. It is great, yeah. But like, for example, like there were big marches during the Chaz. There was huge marches elsewhere in Washington, and one of them was in South Beacon Hill, and there was over 10,000 people. A lot of them were like, were people of color, workers, working class people from their communities. They all came together through their neighborhood, marching through their neighborhood, as far as you could see, workers. Now, it wasn't totally on the basis of class. It was about this issue of like police brutality, but there was very authentic support from lower income working class people and their whole community. People were like up on the roofs, people were like cheering, yeah, you know, like that's what I want to see. That's where the people are at. The people don't live in Capitol Hill. That's like where like where people with money and like petty bourgeoisie, that's Capitol Hill. Capitol Hill is not where the proletarians are at. Proletarians are outside Seattle, you know. Even like Renton, you know, area, right? You know, or like you could say like, you know, Federal Way area, Tacoma, you know, areas like that, you know, there's a lot of very poor working class areas outside of Seattle. And that's what was happening. And they were marching to the police precinct, you know. Now, do I think they're going to burn it down yet? No, not yet. But it was very authentic and very, very community oriented. They didn't come from anywhere. They came from that area right there. And they're all working class people, very oppressed people.
What do you think the government will do now? Or the state, what is going to do? You're going to make a museum or community center from this precinct, or they will just bring everything back?
I think they're going to bring the police back because they don't. Yes, I do. I really think they. I know it would be stupid, but the thing is, nothing can stop them. I think what they're going to do.
You can create a monument of, we're such a free people. With this monument symbolizes it, you know. Or
yeah. I think what they're going to do is very quietly and slowly take it back over again. If they do turn it into a community center, I would be impressed. I think that would happen through like a legislation action, right? People would make a demand to like the city council and people would write signatures on it. It would be a much more formalized process to try to do that. But like from what I understand right now, they are planning on moving police back in there. That's what the chief of police has said, that they're going to try to do that.
Wow.
And then also for the rest of like
It's cheaper for them to build a new building, you know.
Honestly, I mean, here's the thing: is like again, no one burned it down. Now, should they have? I mean, again, Minneapolis got what they wanted by being have a rebellion. That had true mass character. Again, but like Capitol Hill, that's not where the masses are at. But in Minneapolis, there was so many people in the streets, everyone doing all this kind of stuff. That had mass character, legit, true mass character.
Yeah. In this situation, we just don't know the society we live in, you know.
Yes, and that's why, you know, like it's like what Mao says, of course, that like, you know, any type of action you take that is separate from the masses is going to fail. You need the masses to win, no matter what you do. In Minneapolis, the masses were there. In Capitol Hill, you had a lot of support. Do the masses live in Capitol Hill? Is that really like an area? No, South Beacon Hill. If you get 10,000 people marching South Beacon Hill and they want to burn down the police station, that's mass character. Now, because like a lot of people that spearheaded the Chaz, you know, a lot of radicals, but the radicals aren't the majority. You know, they have the right intentions, but it needs to be, we're still looking for that more authentic moment, I think.
Okay, on this point, tell us some wishes. What's going on? What do you wish to our viewers, you know?
I think that the most important thing I can say to the viewers, you know, wherever they are, Russia, Eastern Europe, and places like that, is that the United States is everything's not just burning, everything's not completely falling apart. But the thing to remember, I would say, is that the United States is heading for more crisis. You know, whether that be the economy, we have so many people unemployed. The United States has totally failed with COVID-19. We have over 120,000 people dead, and it's still increasing. We have completely failed on that. And with so many people unemployed, it's almost looking at the levels of the Great Depression. Socialism is becoming more popular. It's a very, you know, it's more and more you see people supporting it for all sorts of different reasons. Even if they think it's like social democratic like Norway, or then there's people also support communism. So you have this massive upswell of interest and stuff like that happening now. And for the first time, in my opinion, also, the left is getting armed. You know, there's John Brown Gun Club. There's also the Socialist Rifle Association, which has over 7,000 members nationwide now. That's a lot of people. That's interest. Things are moving in a direction in a way that we actually have not seen before. Is there enough class consciousness? No, but it is still happening. There's still a capability for it. So there's a lot happening in this country. We live in very, very exciting times. And so I like to end with the Lenin quote, you know, is that there are decades when only weeks happen, and of course there are weeks when everything happens, decades happen. So that's how I'd like to end it. Just remember that. Keep an eye out on the US.